Well, I wanted to connect with everybody about the what we're doing here in our Values Week as we wrap up. We head into Chapter 13, and we do our reading on the influence of expectation, where you've given me a lot to chew on, as I think as a reaction to the readings giving you a lot to chew on. So there are a few things I wanted to talk about. One of them having to do with this idea of how we organize information and how we see everything from physical space to things that have deadlines. How we organize our tasks, as well as how we organize sort of this, how we vision our future. One of the examples I like to use is when I move into a new house. I've moved into a couple new houses now since I've lived here. Is how I organize my garage. So the garage is one of those places. The garage and the attic, and that drawer in the kitchen where you just throw junk. Those are the three things that are most easily just sort of, things get messy and piled up, and you can never find anything. And it's where things that you own that you thought were valuable enough to move across the country go to die, basically, until you move again. So the first thing I do when I move into a garage, new house, is in the garage. I put in new shelving, and I buy a ton of bins and a label maker. And it's not just because I'm that guy who needs to be hyper organized, but it's this idea that if you have a place for things to go, then it's easy to move in and get organized, and have, but you have to have the place first. You have to have the shelves, and you have to have the bins. The example about being a realtor that was on the discussion board. Okay, you have to have an open space when people walk in to imagine where their things will go, or their imagination can't do both the work of uncluttering the space that's there and then reorganizing it in their own vision. It's too much, because if you give them an example of what it looks like, then that's the dominant vision that has primacy. So, that's we have to be careful about how far we extend this metaphor. But I do think that there's value in thinking about, in terms not just of how we look at space, but also how we look at our tasks in front of us, how we look at our values, our own skill development that in our staff and children that are in our care. I know I can apply this to any academic discipline. I know in athletics, one of the things that when I used to be a college basketball coach, and one of the things that we would talk about is, when you're recruiting a player, how much do you have to unteach before you can start teaching? And we would sit around and we kind of talk about that. What kind of program do they come from? A high school program? What kind of habits did they learn? And if those habits that are already developed because they saw them, they were modeled by their coaches, they saw them and their peers being successful with them, and they developed them themselves, that work of unteaching is in many ways more difficult than the teaching itself. In the same way, it's much harder to reorganize a garage that's already cluttered than it is to create a garage space that's empty with bins and shelves when you're first moving in. And so we think about that from a constructivist approach, right? It's one of the first step is that you assess prior knowledge, and you have students make predictions about how they think in this specific issue that you're working on, how they think the universe works around it, why they think it works that way, so that you can uncover this false reasoning or this false knowledge that's going to underpin all the learning that comes after. If you don't uncover all of that first and find ways to correct it or eliminate it and reteach it or unteach it, rather, then you're building upon a shaky foundation. So I think we could take some of these ideas and we can extend them, fairly deeply into the entire learning process, and use that in how we think about approaching people, and how we present new ideas to them. But this idea of how 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 emotion and desire drives our decisions, and it is both of those things. I think we need to disentangle them. So one of them is just the raw emotion, and emotion can be heightened in lots of different ways. It can be caused by pleasure, it can be caused by pain, it can be anger, it can be love, it can be lust, it can be all sorts of different things that are happening, and all of those things in different ways will have an effect on how we make decisions and how other people are making decisions. But then there's also this idea of desire, and again, without extending this maybe too far, we may want to think about almost Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but instead of needs, lay over the idea of desire. And so, there are certain things that we're driven to have, and if we don't have those things, or if those things are put in front of us, we have an opportunity to get them, then the desire to pursue that is so powerful that it can overwhelm a whole host of other kinds of levels of reasoning or decisions that we might make that would apply higher up the hierarchy. And so I think, and that comes true. It comes out in a lot of different types of studies that we're not looking at here, but there is some foundation in the literature for this idea that as we have these primal needs, and that if those aren't met, then it's very hard for us to move beyond and think of these long-term goals, or these ways that we might sacrifice the now for the later. And these things then come together. We do know from the literature that when people are overwhelmed with emotion, that even when they don't have a need, so let's say like food is a great example. I mean, food is as primal a need as you could have, right? Wars have been fought over hunger. So if you, even if you're not hungry, even if you're not coming from a position of want, but so in that situation, you might be faced with multiple food choices, and you might perfectly well choose the one with the fewer calories, the less sugar, the less salt option, because it serves a longer term goal for you. You might be more willing to share. You might be more willing to put off having it, so delaying your gratification. All those things, because of the relative state of not being hungry that you're in, you can make all those decisions and feel comfortable making them. However, if we overload your mind cognitively, or if we overload your mind emotionally, in those cases, you will more likely respond to that situation as if you were in a state of deprivation. And you will make the choice for the thing that is salty or the sweet or the higher calories, or you'll be less likely to delay your gratification. So these things, this desire and emotion, they work together. And emotion and cognitive overload can have the effect in practice of having you act as if you're in a state of severe deprivation, which means that you're acting for the now and you're sacrificing the future when you don't need to, and you normally wouldn't. We talk about arousal in Aurelius chapter 5, and I just talked about food, but this can be extended towards a whole host of types of decisions that we might make in your journals.